Welcome to the Rancher's Voice, presented by the Montana Stockgrowers Association. I'm Jay Bodner, MSGA's Executive Vice President.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt, Director of Natural Resources. Join us for conversations surrounding policy, the legislature, and issues that matter most to ranching families in Montana.
Welcome to this week's episode. This week we're going to be taking a little look at what happened at the legislature. We're also going to be talking about a recent court decision with House Bill 286. We're also going to be looking just at this week what we have at the legislature coming up. And we also are going to have Ethan Wilfore for the brands administrator for the Department of Livestock.
We also want to remind you to subscribe to the Rancher's Voice, follow us on social, make sure to like, comment, and share each episode, and send your questions to Kenny, Keni, at mtbeef.org.
So last week we did have a bit of great news. It came out of the court's decision. It was the Montana First Judicial District Court, and they did rule in favor of the state of Montana regarding the water right ownership, the DNRC, on House Bill 286, and that bill was passed in the legislature in 2019. So just as a reminder, that was brought, the complaint was brought forth by the advocates for school trust lands, and it was clearly denied by the court, and the case was dismissed. So it granted the state of Montana a clear win, and MSGA, along with a number of other interveners, it was just a clear victory for us. So just as a reminder, so House Bill 286, it was developed in the 19 session, and it developed a process where DNRC would have to prove that they had ownership on private wells on private land. And as we said earlier, that court, after following that legislative piece of legislation, it went to court quickly after that, and recently we were a clear victory. So we're pretty excited about that.
Definitely. We also wanted to take an opportunity to thank Senator Tester, Senator Daines, and Representative Rosendale for signing on as co-sponsors to the bipartisan bill Halls Act, and that is the Haulers of Agriculture and Livestock Safety Act of 2021. This bill was brought forward in the Senate, and then a companion bill has also been introduced in the House. But really, this bill provides some flexibilities for agriculture and livestock haulers across the country. And what it does is ensure the ag and livestock producers' hour of service exemptions are in place year-round, provides an additional 150 air miles for hours of service exemptions, as well as updates and clarifies definitions for agriculture commodities. So we're really excited to see that bill on both sides, and want to thank our congressional delegation for their support with that bill.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to that, getting some movement, and it'd be nice to finalize that issue at some point. Next, I'd like to talk just a little bit about, take a few minutes to talk about NCBA and their price discovery framework, or 75% rule. They have just released a recent press release that talked a little bit about where they are in that process. So I wanted to just touch on that for folks that may have not seen that. So this was developed, this framework was developed after the summer business meeting in 2020, and it's called the 75% plan. So weekly trade, 75% of the time on robust price discovery threshold. So no less than 75% of the reporting weeks. And then also the second silo deals with packer participation, where they have to participate no less than 75% of the reporting weeks. So that is kind of where the 75% plan. Part of this plan was that there is a group that goes and evaluates all these reporting weeks to ensure that these triggers are not tripped, and there are minor triggers and major triggers. And after this first reporting quarter, this group did determine that a major trigger was tripped in the first quarter of 2021. And so as the policy is set up, if there are two major triggers tripped, then NCBA would look forward to moving forward more on a legislative or regulatory framework to address that. So They did have been evaluating that on the negotiated trade side of things. A major trigger was tripped once again. They are still working on the packer participation part. There are some challenges with confidentiality that they're working through, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I think overall, there were some successes. So after the implementation of this program and this plan, negotiated trade was up significantly a year over last year in the Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico region. So we have seen some successes. So we'll keep you up to date as that continues to be evaluated.
And another federal update we wanted to bring to you was that a presumptive nominee was mentioned this last week and later in the week had been confirmed by the Biden administration regarding the new director of BLM, and that is Tracy Stone Manning. And some of you may be familiar with that name. She is currently the Associate Vice President of Public Lands and Public Lands at the National Wildlife Federation, and also was the former Chief of Staff for Governor Bullock, and had previously also served under the Bullock administration as Director of Department of Environmental Quality. So we'll be watching that and tracking that as an official nomination occurs, and if nominated, we look forward to working with Tracy in her new role, as it is always great to kind of have Montanans available for us on a national level and serving in those positions.
Yeah, I certainly would agree. We are familiar and we have worked in the past quite extensively with Tracy Stone Manning. So in that position, yeah, we would be, I think, well positioned to be able to have a voice. Just touch a little bit about last week, some of the bills that we did focus on. So I'll start with House Bill 554. That was our National Heritage Area and National Trails bill. They did take executive action in the Senate Ag Committee, and that was passed out of there. Because there was an amendment on the Senate side, this bill is headed back to the House, and hopefully will be shortly after that headed back to the governor. So we're looking forward to that. We'll be following that very closely.
Additionally, House Bill 681, which was the bill in regards to creating an agriculture transportation enhancement account for ports, was also heard and passed out of the Senate Ag Committee. But just quickly wanted to clarify something because there were a lot of questions in the hearing about this bill. This bill is to set up the account, not necessarily provide the funding for the port grants. And so there were a lot of questions about where this money is going to be coming from. To date, there isn't an appropriation tied to this bill. So this bill is really just putting a bill in place that would create an account within the Department of Agriculture that if funding became available, that's where the money would go and then be able to be granted out. So it has passed the Senate Ag Committee, and we will continue to support that and monitor it as it heads out of the House, or out of its second House.
Yeah, and I think that is a good clarification because there was some confusion. Next, House Bill 660. This is the funding bill the funding addition to the Made in Montana program. And we've worked very closely with Josh Kazmaier, Representative Kazmaier, to put some additional money into that. This executive action was taken by the Senate Ag Committee, and it was passed, and it will be now headed to the Senate Finance and Claims in the next few days. So we'll be watching there and take an opportunity once again to testify in support of that bill when it hits that committee.
Looking forward into this week, the week of April 19th, we have a few more bills that have hearings as things are kind of winding down. There are fewer and fewer bills getting introduced, but you can still introduce study bills. And so this first bill that I'm talking about, Senate Joint Resolution 27, is a study bill that has been introduced by Senator Mike Lang and is in regards to studying water rights related to Taylor Grazing Act lands. And so it will have its first hearing on Tuesday in the Senate Ag Committee. And really what this bill is doing is requesting that an interim study committee look at stock water rights surrounding the Taylor Grazing Act lands. And this really comes from concerns regarding federal water right ownership from BLM within our state. And so this bill will ask for a thorough review of not only ownership, but precedent in past law, as well as the databases, beneficial use that's been filed regarding federal water rights, and a whole list of different things within the study bill. If this resolution was to pass, that study bill does state that it would want the study concluded by September 15th of 2022. And so we will be continuing to track that, as well as follow it along if it does become an interim study.
Great. Next, we have Senate Bill 306. This was brought forth by Senator Mike Lang. And this bill would have restructured the Fish and Game Commission. It would have first moved the number of commissioners from 5 to 7, and it would have included 4 landowners. That was amended down to 2 landowners. So this is going to be moving into a Senate Conference Committee hearing on Tuesday. There are 3 conferees that will be attending that. So Senator Lang, Senator Heinbaugh, and Senator Flowers will be a part of that. So we'll be attending that and watching very closely. In addition to that, we have Senate Bill 354. This was brought forth by Senator Steve Heinbaugh, and this dealt with land servitudes and easements, and this was changed pretty significantly in the House to include all prescriptive easements. So this will go into a free conference committee, so both House members and Senate members, and so that they will once again have that opportunity to work out those amendments on this bill on Tuesday.
So that kind of wraps up what we have so far scheduled for the week. As I mentioned, things are kind of slowing down as it relates to bills that have not been heard, or we're in the final legs of getting amendments concurred and things like that. We're also still tracking all of the budget bills as they go through their final stages and get finalized before they head to the governor's desk as well. So with that, we're going to head over to our interview for the week. This week, we are interviewing Ethan Wilfore. He is the Division Administrator for Brands under the Montana Department of Livestock, and we'll be talking a bit about brands in general, as well as the upcoming re-record. So take a listen.
Well, I'd like to welcome Ethan Wilfore to our podcast this week. Ethan is the Brands Administrator. And Ethan, I know you're a little bit new to the agency. You've had an opportunity to visit with our board a couple of opportunities, but I think just for our listeners, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about yourself and your division and what that division does within the Department of Livestock.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Great Falls, so kind of halfway between Raylee and your hometown, Jay. So I went to the University of Montana, which I know is not popular in the ag world. I went there I was there on the extended plan. I was there for 6 years, but I went to grad school and did ROTC when I was there, and served in the Army for a little while. And then got kind of homesick and got out and came home. And as far as the brands enforcement division, so we really have 3 bureaus, and our main purpose is to prevent theft and fraud in the livestock industry in the state. So we've got a Helena Bureau, which is the Records Management Bureau and Compliance Bureau. So we maintain all the inspections, brands are recorded here, and we keep all those records. We have a Market Bureau, so we have 13 markets throughout the state that are licensed through the state, and we handle all the licensing. And we have inspectors there to ensure that the ownership is tracked at the markets during those sales. And then we have the Enforcement Bureau, which is really what it sounds like. They specialize in livestock crimes, livestock laws, investigate those crimes. We've got 16 district investigators throughout the state. They each cover a pretty wide range of country. And then we've got 2 supervisors, one in the west and one in the east.
Definitely cover quite a bit of ground between all 3 of your teams for sure.
So this year, we know that the big item that your division is working on is the brand re-record. And for all of our listeners who are brand holders, they should have received information regarding the re-record. And so we would just like to chat a little bit about what you can tell us on the process and how it's going. And then any information that our listeners should be kind of keeping top of mind as it relates to the department and ensuring folks get their brands re-recorded.
So re-record's going pretty well. I'd say we're generally ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. It means the word's gotten out there, and people are jumping all over re-record. So we started with over 55,000 brands that needed to be re-recorded. With the department, I think it's 55,500. So smack dab between 55 and 66,000. We sent out our applications, or our re-record applications, in a notice form back at the end of December 2020. So if folks did not get that, we have a lot of return mail. So if folks did not get those notices, either they moved or they leave the state for the winter and go south, please give us a call, and we can get you set up to re-record. We don't want those folks missing out on re-record because they didn't get their notices. Other than that, everything else has also picked up. New brand applications have picked up. We've got, I think we've received just so far this year since January 1st, over 600 new brand applications that we are still processing. And at the same time last year, we were just a little over 200. So quite a big uptake in that. Transfers as well. Re-records always a good time to transfer brands. And we've transferred over 800 brands so far this year versus just a little over 200 at the same time last year. So to go on with that, we have quite a bit of a backlog. We can only work those brands in the order we receive them, and we only have one person that can work those at a time. So we're roughly 6 to 8 weeks behind, I'd say, on new brand applications. So if folks are getting a little impatient, they give us a call. We could and we can check in on it for them. But we're asking them to be patient because it is so busy.
Do you know how many of the 55,000 brands that need to be re-recorded have been re-recorded?
So we've completely re-recorded just over 25,000 of those. And we've got about 1,000 in the backlog. And we should be through those by the middle of next week. So just about everyone that sent in their application for re-record either has gotten their certificate or should be getting it here pretty soon.
Great. Ethan, one of the things that we've heard a little bit is, myself being one of them, is I got the letter early in December and decided I should probably re-record right now. So I sent in my check, and then, as the months pass by, you kind of forget about, did I re-record that? Did I write that check or not? And so one of the things and a few questions that we've had, is there an easy way for people to check to see if the department has, one, received their information and received or confirmed that receipt or payment?
Yep. So the easiest way is if you've gotten the certificates change colors every 10 years. So if you got a new purplish colored certificate, you're re-recorded. If the only one you have is a tan one, then you might want to give us a call. There's no real easy way online or anything to check the status of it. Give us a call and we can definitely look into it. It's real quick for us. We can look into the payment and the application.
Great, thank you.
Great. And another question that we've heard quite a bit, and I know folks are kind of eagerly waiting on, is what happens after re-record? We know that typically not all brands are re-recorded, or some become available. So what's the plan on what happens to those brands that become available, and how can people find out what is available once December rolls around?
So the beginning of 2022, so those brands that were not re-recorded become inactive. which is really the purpose of re-record is to make sure we have an accurate log of registered brands in Montana. So yeah, like you said, Raylee, naturally a lot of those, I shouldn't say a lot, but a chunk of those don't get re-recorded. We're planning on publishing an inactive brands list, updating one at the beginning of 2022, which is just after re-record ends. And that will have all the brands that were not re-recorded. Now, with those brands going inactive, it doesn't necessarily mean they're available because they still are subject to conflict check. And with the new brands that come in that are issued, that those conflicts are always changing. So I would caution people that they're not necessarily available if they're inactive, but it is a good place to start if you're looking to apply for a brand.
Great. And Ethan, I think it's also important just to remind people that there is no grace period following the December timeframe. So if people are engaged and want to re-record their brand, they need to be able to very closely follow kind of the time frame that's set forward with them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there is no grace period. So what the department does do is those folks that are trying to apply for a brand they forgot to re-record, they are the only ones that can apply for that brand again, but that is treated as a new brand application. And that period goes, I think, for the first 3 months of the year. But it's not a true grace period because it is treated as a new brand.
Okay, great. And would have to go through the same conflict policy that you just mentioned.
Exactly.
Great. So just kind of moving on with the conflicts, and especially two iron brands. We've heard a lot about it at the legislature. There's been some proposed legislation that failed. The governor, Gianforte, did send a letter to the Board of Livestock, and he did ask for an internal review on the brand's policy. And I know that at the March board meeting, the Board of Livestock did talk about developing a new committee to kind of look at this review policy. So what can you tell us about how that may look and what the future of that potential committee actions they may take and what that review may look like?
Yeah, so I'm in full agreement. I think the policy does need to be reviewed and updated at the very least. And two character brands are harder to get, and part of that's a numbers game. We're going to be quickly approaching 60,000 brands here pretty soon, registered in the state. But yeah, the board is putting a committee together and are looking to partner with industry groups, producers, local inspectors, staff of the department. So I would encourage anyone that is a member of the industry group to go through the industry group and try to get on that committee. I know stock growers in the department have partnered relatively recently on getting some ideas together, but it's a pretty complex process, and the department has certain duties in regulating the brands that are issued and certain obligations by law. But I know that we also want the producers to be able to get good brands that they want. So it is a complex issue. So all the input that folks can provide and any ideas are always welcome. But we floated some ideas at the last board meeting, and we can look at adding some characters, reviewing the actual regional conflicts, which I think could be reviewed and have some of those altered, and looking at the geographical area of conflict checks as well.
Great. And is there a timeline yet on that? I know the board just talked about it. So do they have a date in mind on when that committee will be kind of formed and reviewing?
I think we'll probably get a little bit more clarity at the May board meeting. It's May 5th. I think we'll have a little bit clearer timeline. There's not at the last boarding, we didn't really establish a true timeline, but definitely before the end of the year.
Great. So we've kind of talked about the need and reminder for everyone to re-record their brands, and then, when people are applying for new brands, there is the potential of conflicts. And so we just want to make sure that our listeners are aware of what their options are if a producer applies for a brand and doesn't receive that brand. But there's options to appeal and kind of work through a process. So can you share that for everyone just so that they're aware that there are options rather than just receiving the letter back?
Yeah. So the appeal process is actually pretty simple. We just need an appeal in writing. And that first appeal will go to me. If they disagree with my decision, I'll go to the executive officer of the department. And then after that, it would go to the board. But we just need an appeal in writing. And I review those. When I review them, I'll review them completely objectively, and just really my purpose is to make sure the policy was followed, and that's what I'll use to review it. So I will essentially take those conflicts and take the policy and make sure everything was done properly. And I usually turn those around pretty quickly, usually within a week or maybe two at the longest. But it is a good process for a lot of different reasons. It's essentially an internal review of our own policies and making sure we're following those. And it's good that producers, really are providing feedback to the department on some of the policies as well.
Yeah, and I think it has helped a lot with, as folks do apply for that brands, and there's a little bit of explanation that gets included in that, which has provided, I think, a lot of good information for producers as they apply for that. So I think certainly moving down the right direction, and it is nice to know that they can appeal that and what that process entails. So just as you in your new position, you've had an opportunity to kind of look with some fresh eyes at the entire and evaluate your entire process. And certainly from a governor's perspective, they're looking at opportunities to cut the red tape within agencies. And so have you looked through that? Is there anything that you've seen that there's opportunity to kind of create some more efficiencies within the department in the future?
Yeah, I think a lot of this will focus around I guess technology and some more self-service options for producers. So I think the more producers can take care of their needs just really quickly online through the website, the better. So basically, one of the big things that we're looking at is merging that brands database with our compliance system. So and having a system that producers can go and look at all of their brand information. They would be able to look up those inspections, possibly some animal health information as well. So whether that's through the website or with a login or through a mobile application, that's kind of the goal in the next few years to get to something like that. And then with that, we'd like, eventually to move to electronic inspections as well. It's pretty work intensive and pretty complicated. But that's, I think in terms of improving efficiency, that's kind of where we're placing our focus.
Great. That sounds very user friendly, hopefully. So as we kind of round out the interview, and you kind of mentioned it in the beginning of your opening, but your division really, your primary role is identity and theft and fraud. And so can you just talk to us and our listeners and share anything that they maybe need to be on the lookout for right now as it relates to kind of theft and fraud and things that may be happening in our state?
So livestock theft is still pretty prevalent in this state. There are cases being investigated, pretty often, and it's the district investigators are constantly looking into those things. And it might have changed a little bit. You do still see a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but you do still see illegal branding, altering of brands. But a lot of this is kind of going to the paperwork side. We're seeing, I guess, forged bills of sale is a little bit more prevalent, I think, than it was illegal branding, so using brands that aren't registered to this with the state or weren't re-recorded, that still happens. But if folks are noticing things like that, reach out to district investigators, give us a call, and we just kind of got Crime Stoppers up and running again, the Livestock Crime Stoppers Commission. And I can certainly provide that phone number for you guys. That's a good way to report crimes if you want to remain anonymous. And if it leads to conviction, you can get cash rewards as well. So there are a lot of ways to report, but I'd encourage people, if they see something, to please let somebody know.
That's great, thanks. And it does appear that those folks that are breaking the law are getting a little bit more sophisticated in their approach to taking livestock, and so it's important for us to be vigilant. And I would remind our listeners that if you hear of things like that, once again, always make sure that you make that phone call to your office or the district investigator to make sure that, if there's a trend that's happening in that community, we'd like people to know about it. So I think that does kind of wrap us up for today, Ethan. And once again, we very much are glad you're in your position. We enjoyed working with you and look forward to working with you in the future as we look at this brands review committee. I'm thinking it's important for folks to be vigilant and making sure that they do get their brands re-recorded. And so with that, we'd like to just thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to visit with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, once again, we'd like to thank Ethan for joining us today. He's a great resource when it comes to brands and brand re-record. So just as a reminder, make sure you get your brand re-recorded and don't miss that opportunity.
We'd also like to thank you for joining us, and thank you for subscribing to The Rancher's Voice. We'd love to see you on social, so make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and make sure to like, share, and comment on each episode. If you have questions for us, make sure to email those to Kenny, KENI, @mtbeef.org, and we would like to thank you for listening.
Thanks, everybody.